Everybody for being thank you so much for being here today, everybody. My name is Mario Guevara. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the Development and Operations Coordinator here at Equality Virginia. We are so excited to welcome you today to Breaking Boundaries and Building a Stage, a keynote discussion with Tona Brown, moderated by Bianca Humady Ray. Like the interpreter said, please click on the globe button and select your language. Both English and Spanish dominant participants need to be able to select their language so you're able to fully participate. ASL interpreters are going to also be pinned to the screen. This session will have closed captions in English. You simply click the closed caption button and show subtitles to see them. They may pop up as a separate box or show up at the bottom of the screen. You can also see a transcript by pressing the transcript button. Also do note that in webinar mode, all participants are going to be muted. For questions, you can drop the questions in the Q&A box, and just know that we will be taking those at the end of the keynote. But if you can't find it, just try tapping participants or the more button. For the chat, please do be aware about how much you're using it, and try not to send long messages or anecdotes. We do have a live chat box translator that is doing it in person. So this will just make sure that they're able to get to everything at the time. The staff Zoom host today is going to be Talia, and our digital room monitor for this session is Dove. And we're all going to be monitoring this meeting to make sure that we can keep it safe and secure for you to enjoy. As always, if you have any technical difficulties, please feel free to reach out to me, the digital room monitor, Talia, and we'll make sure that we can get everything settled for you. But right now, I would love to welcome Tona Brown. Tona Brown is a vocalist, a violinist, an entrepreneur, and a teacher with an international performance career as a violinist, mezzo-soprano, and has performed throughout the United States, Canada, and Europe. Ms. Brown is also an advocate for transgender issues and the arts, often speaking and performing at colleges and universities. Tona is the first transgender woman of color to perform the national anthem for a sitting president at the LGBT Leadership Gala dinner for former President Barack Obama at the Sheraton in New York City. Tona was also the first transgender woman to headline at Carnegie Hall, performing a program of African-American composers with an all-inclusive LGBT cast of performers. Ms. Brown was formally educated at the Shenandoah University and Conservatory of Music, studying violin performance with a minor in viola, piano, and voice. Tona graduated from the Governor's School of the Arts, a prestigious high school for gifted and talented students. Tona recorded an opera movie for Shenandoah University's 2021 production of Suor Angelica. Apologize if I ruin that name, playing the role of La Zia Principessa. Miss Brown will be performing in a lead transgender role as Hannah. In the opera As One by Laura Kaminsky, with the Lowell Chamber Orchestra under the direction of Orlando Shela in the fall of 2021. Ms. Brown was also asked to do a masterclass on transgender voices by the Virginia National Association of Teachers of Singing, and teaches private lessons to students with her company, Ada Studios. She now has her own show on twitch.tv called Conversations with Tona Brown, and you can follow her on the Prima Donna Tona channel on YouTube. I'd also like to introduce our moderator, Bianca Humady Ray. Bianca was born in the Philippines and now lives in Springfield, Virginia. She works as an equity, inclusion, and diversity specialist. She's the chair of Aqua DC, and she also serves on the board of directors for Equality Virginia. In her spare time, Bianca enjoys hiking, dancing, yoga, singing, and spending time with her family. I'm pleased to welcome Tona and Bianca to the stage.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mario, and folks in the room. Welcome and good afternoon to everyone. And Tona, I said earlier, I'm really excited about the opportunity to have this conversation with you and get to know you a little bit more. into this space. So really looking forward to our conversation today and listening to Mario around your bio and all of the accolades and the work and the successes that you're doing. It's pretty amazing. And on top of that, really being intentional in ensuring that our identity as trans folks, non-binary folks, is also part of any engagement, any conversation, and any visibility that you have, not only in the United States, but really around the world. So I want to first say thank you for doing all of that and elevating our visibility and amplifying and continue to amplify our voices.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. So for folks, again, we are going to start this conversation by asking Tona some pre-prepared questions that we have put together. And then we are going to check on the chat box for any questions that you may have to Tona directly. So if you have any question, feel free to use the chat box feature so that way we can look into them before we end our call. So Tona, let's get right into it. Are you ready?
I am ready. This is the highlight of my week. I've been looking forward to this all week, so I'm ready to go.
Great. All right. Well, I want to start first with your career and your profession, which is music, right? And clearly on your bio and just, really looking into your experiences, you've done so many amazing things with music. So I want to start my question with what got you interested in music?
Well, I would have to say my grandmother and family. My grandmother used to sing a lot around the house, and it was always spirituals and hymns and things. Um, just while cooking or just doing anything, we would go walking, and all of a sudden she burst out in song. And so as a kid, it was very nice to hear. And I don't think she considered herself a professional singer or anything, but it was just something that she did. And so from that point, I started singing in church. So it started from church, like many people of color. Um, but then I stopped singing. So I stopped singing. My family is known for being great dancers when it came down to the arts. And so I started doing ballet, tap, and jazz, and I just kind of dropped the music part, you know what I'm saying, as you do when you're a kid, because you think you're so grown. And you know everything. So I stopped the music part, and I was like, well, I'm going to be a dancer. Unbeknownst to me, going through a transition so early in my life where I just knew that something wasn't necessarily quote unquote right with the gender I was assigned at birth. So it was just trying to figure that out while trying to dance. Now, I don't know if anyone else are professional dancers or have taken dance, but it's very gender specific, as you can imagine, especially in ballet. And I'm one of those people that if I'm going to do something, I want to go to the top. So I started doing research on like the Bolshoi ballet and like stuff overseas and different things. And my weight fluctuations was just not gonna cut it. I didn't feel very comfortable with just how my body was changing during puberty, just a number of things, you're all in your head, all of those things. And so I started in the 5th grade, I decided to go with the school to a performance for kids. It's a performance of Peter and the Wolf. And Peter and the Wolf is made so that students can go and learn about the different instruments. And I saw the first violinist, who happened to be a guy, the principal violinist, and he had all these solos. And so I leaned over to my teacher and I said, I want to be just like him. And he was like, oh, you want to play the violin? I said, but he didn't get what I was saying. I wanted to be in the front and I wanted to be playing the solos. I didn't just want to play the violin. Like I wanted to make a difference with playing the violin. And that's what got me into music. My family was very supportive, yet they were not musicians, and they definitely weren't classical musicians.
Mm.
So I had no real, support in the sense of, someone's taking you off to private lessons or they're coming to your concerts. I didn't have any of that. They basically said, if you want to do this, you're on your own because we don't know anything about it, and I was fine with that. It was something that it just, from the moment I would hear a chord and hear a certain melody from day one, I would just hum it all the time. It just would. In class, I got in trouble in elementary school and middle school because I would continue to not focus on the subject at hand, but I would have my music books and I would just read the music books and hum the things and tap a little bit underneath the seat while in class, which is extremely disrespectful. You think about that, you know what I mean? And especially me as a teacher now, I totally get why my parents got called in for a parent-teacher conference. And they were just like, we love what your son at the time, we love what your son does, but as soon as he finishes this assignment, there's no more communication or concentration from your child, like what's happening. So anyway, so from the very, very beginning, I knew for some weird reason, I just knew that I was meant to be a musician.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great, Tona. Thank you for sharing. I think it says a lot about passion, really, right? That stems from like the very early age of you, who you are as a person, even trying other things, right? Just like other kids who would get into sports and finding their interests or where they excelled at and everything, and then finding out that, okay, maybe this is not the right path for me, and then going back to like where it really started, which for you was music, right? Not that dancing was not any good or bad, but it's always goes back to like the music. One of the things that you mentioned that really was very powerful for me was when you saw the guy, the first violinists, and you had leaned to your teacher and said that I want to be like him, but you were looking at it from a totally different lens, from a totally different perspective, which is just truly powerful because it says that I want to excel in the craft that I have, but I also want to use that craft to be more visible and have people down the line or in the future to see themselves who may have that skills of being a violinist to reflect on who you are and your identity and your orientation, and just have that hope, to that young individual that I can live my authentic self and play the violin and be in the center stage just as my true authentic self. So I thought that was really, really powerful.
Yeah, and just not knowing, that's the wonderful thing with my company, IETA Studios. I teach students from 5 or 6 all the way through 70. And one of the things that I communicate with them is one of the wonderful things about taking music lessons as a young person, or just being involved in music or sports, so like you said, anything that brings a lot of people together, is that that child doesn't know what society or the world says that they can or cannot do. So if we break it down to just learning how to play your scales, if I was to tell that person that they can't do it, it would make a huge difference. And I think that one of the reasons why I always remember that first teacher is because he could have just turned around and said, oh, well, you're going to be in the back, or maybe you want to try another instrument, or he could have just done something to throw in a dun, 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 as we do, and throw that in and just totally make me not want to pursue it as a career or feel that it was possible.
Yeah.
And that's why I am very protective of my students. Many of them are recording artists all around the world, and they come to me with things that are going on. And I'm so protective because I'm like, well, who told you you couldn't sing? Or why are you doing X, Y, Z now?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And all your students are very lucky to have you as their teacher because you're just truly looking at it from like a totally different lens, not really fitting into what society is telling us or what the society needs, right? For you to be successful at a craft with so many different things, whether it could be a gender role or binary role, and you're just really looking at it from all of outside of the boxes, which is pretty, really amazing for your students. So they're very lucky to have you as their teacher.
And I see one of them is here. She's
Ah.
right. So great.
That's great.
Some of
That's
them here.
awesome. Right. Well, I have another question for you. So, going back to your music, I'm very curious. With all of the amazing performances that you have, one of them, being able to be in the same space as the former President Barack Obama, right? Which I would imagine is on your top 5 list of amazing things, right? But I wanted to ask, what's your favorite performance yet outside of that?
Yeah, I'm so glad thank you for framing it that way, because of course that would be the number one that I'll never forget. But I would have to say, we'll go back to high school. I went to a very progressive high school. I'm from Norfolk, Virginia originally, and my teachers there saw a talent that I didn't see or know. I just wanted to express myself. And so there were a couple of mentors that I had that would take me with them to the symphonies and to the opera houses. And they would pick me up from my aunt at the time. I moved out from my parents because they lived here in Northern Virginia. And I wanted to continue to do the program after I auditioned in the 8th grade. And then so 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, I was in this program. And it meant so much to me that I felt that I really wanted to stay in the program, right? So they would pick me up from the projects where my aunt was living at the time. And I think of just how amazing that is because they never judged me on those things. And they would give me free lessons. And sometimes for 3 and 4 hours at a time. And I think about just how much of a difference that made. And I also had mentors that looked like me as well, and some that didn't. So from an early age as well, from middle school, being in the Norfolk State Junior Music Program, doing things at Hampton University, at Old Dominion University, and then going to the governor's school and seeing LGBTQ teachers.
Yeah.
And seeing, brown and, tan, like all of us Asian folk, like it was so diverse and it was so non-judgmental. Only thing they judged you on really was could you play or perform? Okay. If you didn't do that, you were not asked to come back again. And I tell you, that made such a huge difference for me because I didn't know who I was then. I was struggling with my identity and I was starting to write this depressing like poetry and stuff like that. But I appeared very happy to everyone. I'm winning these auditions. But part of it was now being in therapy for so many years and having great friends who are amazing social workers and stuff who have been there for me for so many years now. But part of that was the violin was a way for me not to think about all of those things and to fixate on something that I really enjoyed. And that made the world of a difference. So having those sort of possibility models, Mr. Daryl Husky was the first Black male teacher in my area, who was such a prolific violinist that I was amazed in 8th grade, 7th grade, I think it was, when I first met him. I was so amazed at his talent. And then he had a string quartet, which also had so many people of color in it. This is stuff that I'd never seen before. You know, we take it for granted now, but I'd never seen these things. And then I was asked to go and perform for the Gateways Music Festival at 15 or 16. And that is an all Black and Latino classical music festival in New York, and they would pay for everything so that we could come all the way up there to Rochester, New York. I ain't never been to no Rochester, you know. You know, so I'm like on the little bus with my friends, and we're heading up there, and you audition and they pay for your food and lodging. So that was the beginning of knowing what the future could possibly be if I decided to take this as a career. And I never looked back. Once the teenage years happened, I didn't know how it was going to happen, but I knew that even if I was going to be standing outside on my porch playing or singing, that's just what I was going to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. You know, I wanted to kind of reiterate, you know, what you mentioned around visibility, because oftentimes, like, you know, as Mari said, I grew up in the Philippines and I never really saw anybody that looks like me in anything, right? So when I moved to the United States and I really started getting involved with the community as I was, you know, trying to find out who I am and figure all of that, and through my transition journey, and then met, you know, Gina Rosero was this, you know, like Filipino trans activist. I saw myself that, and it's possible, to your point of, you know, sometimes we take for granted, you know, this little things that is so important, you know, to our community in terms of really elevating our visibility, and individuals such as yourself, you know, Gina Rosero and other activists, you know, that are out and proud and very visible, really, you know, does make a lot of impact for somebody who are in, you know, like suburban Virginia or Norfolk, who sometimes feel like they're going through their, you know, transition journey on their own or by themselves. So, you know, if we have more individuals that is a representative of not only diversity, but all of the intersectionalities that we represent, right? You know, it gives hopes, you know, to those folks that, you know, what I'm going through is part of the journey and there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, it is imperative to success. If you haven't seen it before, then you have to try to figure out how it's going to happen. But you have to know and feel that you are worthy of success, that you can do it. And no matter what people tell you, I mean, my whole career has been a middle finger to the world, because everyone told me that it was not possible. There was no one that thought it was possible. I couldn't even find a manager because they didn't know what to do with my niche market. And, you know, they have all kinds of excuses for why they don't want to take you on and that kind of thing, agents and stuff like that. But it had never been done before. There was no Laverne Cox, who's a good sister of mine, you know, Gina Rosero, great lady. I've seen her at many events. I got pictures with her. You know, she's great. I chat with her. I mean, these weren't that during that time in the 90s and early 2000s, in the 80s and stuff like that. We didn't really have that.
Yeah.
So it's imperative that no matter where you get that mentorship from, that you get it, that you take it full advantage of it, and that you work really hard. You really have to work really hard to be successful in whatever it is you're going to do, especially in music and the arts, because it's hard to make into a business.
Yeah. Yeah. And I could imagine it, you know, it's such a small, right, tight-knit community, just like with all of the other communities, right? So it's really important, to your point, to, you know, once you have that connection with a mentor who has the same niche that you have, you definitely tap into that. And that kind of connects to my next question to you, Tona, right? So, you know, you've done through your career in music, really being intentional and amplifying our trans and non-binary folks' voices, right? So how do you view your role of activism in your musical work?
Well, I'll tell you, someone just mentioned in the chat about me being the Grand Marshal at Hampton.
Yeah.
And I will say, I remember being in tears during that experience because, again, because Virginia is really now opening up and we're getting so many more opportunities than when I was growing up to be out and proud and accepted and all those things. That had just never happened before. And so, first thing about activism is that I would never have been an activist if it wasn't for Monica Roberts. Monica Roberts was such a huge influence to me because she understood that most of us didn't understand how important we really were. Do you see what I'm saying? She knew that I didn't get it. I just wanted to be an artist and a musician. That was it. I wasn't trying to be the poster child for anything. I just knew that I'd been in school ever since I was a kid doing this. Thank you, Keita. Love you. I'd always done this, and how dare you tell me that I can no longer do it because of my gender identity? What does that have to do with me singing this aria or playing the violin? It has absolutely nothing to do with it. But I then had to learn from that diva, Monica Roberts, that there is a lot that comes along and that it does mean something to be transgender and out in the industry. And so I had to do research. I had to do research and I had to figure out, well, I'm not trying to be an advocate or activist, but I need to know what that means. And I need to know why is that important. And so from that point on, she took me underneath her wings. And of course, you know, she had the big Transgrio blog.
Yeah.
So she would cover every time I was in the media, she would put it on her blog, and then she would educate me on things that other ladies and gentlemen were doing, whether they were non-binary, whatever it was. She would just be like, did you hear about this? She would send me these things. She would send me historical things so that I felt like I belonged. And that's what's important. You know, you got so many of these young people who don't read anymore. You know what I'm saying? You got to read and know your history, because then you understand that you are relevant, that what you're doing is not new. Okay. Everything that we're doing today has been done before. Okay. We were just called different things, sometimes horrible things, but we were called different things. The look and things were different. But the whole point is, after I realized from talking to her and going into some of these political events, how important it was that someone represents what I represent and that someone represents what you represent. Okay, and what he represents, and she, and they, and that it is very important to just be yourself, and also not to be ashamed of who you are. And I never was, so you know, I never have been ashamed of being me. I just knew I was me.
Lo soy, yo nunca se avergonzaba de ser que yo soy,
Even though she didn't quite understand,
y aunque mi familia no me entendía, uno
she just said, "You are my child. I love you." And now that we know what is going on, because she knew ever since I was very, very young that I was different. And so she said, now I think that you're going to be going through some changes and that you're going to transition. And what I want to do from this point on is train you to be who you are, you know, and to represent our family well. And that was her thing, you know, it was, as long as you didn't bring, you know, embarrassment to our family name, so to speak.
Yeah. I think you know, Tona, that is such a great sentiment to share. I totally can relate to you. You know, my mom, you know, she loves me and supported me. She supports me, and she still does support me. until now. But, because of culture that we have, growing up in the Philippines, it's 98% Roman Catholic, that we also did not have that sit down conversation of, what does it mean when you're saying you're transitioning or you're going to identify as female, you're trans, all that other stuff. But I know deep inside that, there's always that love, and support. And for that, I'm forever grateful, because I know just from, hearing from other folks' experience, it's not the same as mine. So I truly treasure that moment, and forever grateful that I have a very supportive mother, because it really does play a very important role, at least for me, to where I am now in my life, and in my career, because I could not even imagine what my life could have been like if I did not have that support from my mom.
But more importantly, how do you view yourself when you have that support from your parents, or even if someone doesn't get it from their immediate family structure, but they
Absolutely.
were able to get it from friends and
Yeah.
family that's on the exterior of that, it helps you to understand your worth
Yeah.
because of that love that you have. And we're very blessed to have had that. And it doesn't mean that that parent is perfect either. I think that when I mention that to people, sometimes they act as if, okay, my mom woke up and knew everything about having a transgender child. No, she used to talk to the press for me. And one of the most powerful things she said before she died was that a transgender child, if you have a transgender child, there's a period of mourning for the life that you thought that that child was going to have. And my mom has always been so happy and supportive, and always telling me, helping me with my self-esteem. I never knew that my mom thought that way or went through that. And so I had to shut everything down and just be like, wow, mom, I never knew that you felt that way. You always pushed me up. And, she said, yeah, she said, if I was to give advice to parents, that this is something that you must do. You must face the fact that your child is not what you necessarily thought they were going to be. But the experience is so wonderful because I gained the daughter that I always wanted.
Mm.
And so, but that's a whole nother conversation.
We'll have part 2 of this conversation, maybe like a quarter from now or sometime next year. So hint, hint, Equality Virginia. Well, I have a few more questions for you, but I wanted to check on our chat box, because there are a couple of questions, at least, that I'm getting messages from. So I'm gonna turn it over to Mario, I believe, or Talia, and see if we can have those questions be uplifted so we can ask Tona those questions.
Definitely. Kelton Hollister asks, what voice parts do you enjoy singing the most, and or how do you navigate classical gendered categorizations of singing voices, i.e. soprano, alto, tenor, and bass?
Sure. So I'm a mezzo soprano, and I also sing contralto roles as well, which is just, amazing, because I love the contralto stuff because you get to have like the very dark and low register, but you tend to play characters that are kind of in the same scope when you're my voice type. So for instance, you're an old lady, or you're coming in to have some kind of drama, you're a woman of the evening, because all of these lower tones and all of the middle voice is how composers, when they were thinking and hearing melodies, thought of as sex appeal, believe it or not. And if you and there have been studies to show that when people hear female voices or whatever, and the voice lowers some, what it does to them. So it's interesting. So I love the role of Samson and Delilah. Carmen is great, but I love Verdi. singing Amneris, or Ebony would be like a dream, but she's way up there in the rafters. But I love Ebony. So but I'm technically speaking a mezzo. So my voice sits right in the middle, or second soprano, as far as the vocal classification, or my FOC is.
Great, thank you for that. Mario, do we have a second question, or those were the two?
I actually do have a second question, just similarly, what's your favorite aria to sing? And that's the last one.
Oh my goodness, I don't know. I don't know if I have a favorite anymore. I will say that those roles, anything that's within those, Mocha, I would say, yeah, anything from Samson Delilah. What I like is that a lot of the roles that I play, I'm a very strong character, and I surround myself by very strong women in general. And so I love to portray these women on the stage. And so any of those arias are really, really, really impactful to me.
Very nice. Thank you. So Mario, do we have additional question?
Not a
Comments?
question, but I know Charlie had just dropped in something from the Q&A box, just saying that he said, I don't have a specific question. I just want to say that, Tona, I heard you years ago and was blown away with the music, and this is beautiful. This beautiful young woman playing an instrument, we are POC, we don't usually see. Thank you for being that pioneer and walking your walk for us.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you. Good seeing you here. And that actually kind of connects to my next question for you, Tona, right? In that same realm of, how do you, how can you be more intentional, right? Using your craft and elevating the visibility of our community. And you had mentioned Monica Roberts, which I had the greatest opportunity to meet at the Philadelphia Trans Health Conference. And when I first met her, I was just like, oh my goodness. And then from there, I've followed her and I've seen her in, other events, just like, with all of the other activists. And I echo, the same sentiment that you said, that, though we don't intend to be the activists for our community, it just naturally happens, and you can do it in so many different ways, right? And I think for you, it's music and making sure that people can see you in that spaces that oftentimes many of us don't even think about seeing, right? So that's very powerful, and that's another form of activism. My question for you is, what is your vision for the future for music and Black trans artists and, trans people of color?
Well, I'm going to be very specific. Very specific.
Thanks.
What we need now as Black trans artists, or LGBTQ down the road, what we need is organizations to fund our ideas and events and things of that nature. That is the problem that we're at now. As I've mentioned before, with my Carnegie Hall debut, performing for the president, all of those things came from either support from the community or me paying for everything myself. Now imagine all of the other people that have all these other privileges. They don't pay for anything up front usually. Okay. And so what I tell people all the time is that you can and will be very successful if this is something that you want to go into, but you may have to pay for some things that most people don't at first until you get to a certain level or have a certain brand. But even with those of us that have brands that have been around for some time, corporations generally, not all the time, we can get very fortunate and things are changing, which is great, but generally will not fund your event. Okay. And that is very, very disheartening. But it's the reality. They're too nervous to put their brand behind you because you are a transgender person or gender nonconformist or something like that. And that's just keeping it real. So what we need going forward, there's plenty of wonderful ideas, great artists. I mean, I cannot wait to interview some of them on Conversations with Tona Brown. You guys, I cannot wait. I'm hearing great high quality music. I'm hearing, of every genre, because we are the creators. That's just part of who many of us are. That's what we do. It's a natural thing. We view the world differently, and that's why we're relevant, and that's why we're needed. Half of these ladies wouldn't even look the way they look if it wasn't for my friends who do them up on the red carpet. That's what we're here for, amongst other things. Don't get me wrong. But I'm saying that's part of the beauty in being different. The beauty in being different. One of the quotes I love is, what is the person that says, you laugh at me because I'm different. I laugh at you because you're all the same. I agree with that 255%. I don't want to be just like everyone else. I don't want to live just like everyone else. I want to do what I want to do. I want to enjoy being around people that are different, that make me think differently. I might have an opinion of something, and then I meet you, and you tell me about your experience in the Philippines, and I go, oh my goodness, I never thought about it from that perspective. We should all be, as people, constantly trying to grow and develop our mindsets. What's the point of just doing everything the same? I don't get it. So that is what we need going forward. I envision a world where you see how Little Nas X is starting to get all of these, he's getting corporate funding and all this kind of stuff. We need to see that kind of same tenacity, same sort of support financially for transgender projects. Specifically, now we're going to bring it back to us. Specifically with now, when I went around for Carnegie Hall, I also sent out probably 200 letters to LGBTQ organizations, and none of them helped fund the event. Now, if I was a white trans person, they would have funded that event. In fact, they told me, my friends and everyone, it was the fact that it had never been done at Carnegie Hall. I was a person of color. It was mostly a program of people of color, and white people did not get behind helping fund the event. That's just the reality. It's hurtful. People don't want to hear the truth, but that's what it is. Okay. So we need to stop that. I was getting stuff from some of them saying, well, if we help you, are you going to be riding around in a limo? What? What does that have to do with anything? And I deserve to ride around in a limo. Why is it that Caitlyn Jenner or some of these people can ride around in a limo, but I can't ride around in a limo? Not that I was, you guys. We couldn't even afford the microphone. That was the extra $5,000, I believe it was. And guess what? All of this was underneath my company. Do you see what I'm saying? So that is what needs to change. And we need to have these conversations, and we need to keep it real about what is happening behind the scenes, business-wise.
Great. Thank you, Tona, first and foremost, for your transparency and for keeping it real, and really, a lot of the points that you have shared is so true, because we've in 2021, even in the virtual world, we're still seeing where, trans folks are sharing their experiences and their stories. And, many of them, all they get is like a thank you. I appreciate the time that you put in there, but they don't realize, the impact from physical, mental, emotional, to that individual who have just put themselves in front of everybody and telling their story, and, like not being, compensated and appreciated, and, being taken care of, for all of those things, and all they get is thank you. So I think it's truly, truly important, to your point, for organization to really have that right in the beginning. It shouldn't even be a conversation after the fact, right? And stuff
I
like that.
mean,
It should be
well,
right
think
there,
about
right
it.
in the beginning.
Well, think about this. If you are an organization that, without mentioning specific names, but if you're an organization that does these surveys and you've learned that transgender people, specifically of color, tend to make $15,000 to $10,000 a year, how disrespectful is it for you to come to me to do something for your organization and not offer, even if I decline, but not offer to compensate me for my time?
Mm.
Because you already know the statistics. Your organizations do the research. You know what we're going through. So when we come to you, you know that we're coming to you from being oppressed many, many, many times under. Okay, so let's not play this game. Now, the other thing that I will say in the defense of some of these organizations that don't fund things is that a lot of times they will fund people that don't have a lot of experience. Those people seem to get all the money, okay? But people like myself, some of my lawyer friends who are trying to do activism and have been activists for many, many years, we don't get those sort of things from these organizations. We're not getting those type of grants and what have you. And that's a problem. I will acknowledge that. It's a problem. But I've been doing what I've been doing for a long time. And my brand has been very, very consistent. So if I charge you XYZ, it's not because I'm being greedy or whatever. It's because that's the going rate of whatever it is you ask me to do. But you won't pay me, but you will pay a white gay man. Okay, you will pay him tens of thousands of dollars to come to your event and to speak or perform. So again, we have to keep it real about what's happening even within our own LGBTQ community when it comes down to not wanting to pay transgender people for our time and our skills. That has to change.
Yeah, and Tona, I don't know if you're following the chat. There's a lot of energy and enthusiasm into that sentiment that you just said. So, just want to uplift some of them. Charlie had mentioned that the white-led organizations either refuses to pay us or just ignore us altogether. We have to hold these organizations accountable for their racial profiling, right?
Wow, thank you for saying that.
Yeah, and so we're at time, but I do have one more question for you, and then we'll close with that, and then you can kind of share with them, where they can follow you or where they can continue to watch you in your journey. So here's the question, last question for you. Do you have particular advice for trans opera singers?
I do. I have tons of it. First and foremost, make sure that you're ready, because when the opportunity does come to you, you have to be ready to just go. And sometimes you're going to have to take risks in certain projects that you involve yourself with. Okay. Also, you have to be realistic about where we are. A lot of us are going to be doing projects where you're the first ... to do ... Okay, so with that, especially for some people who feel very entitled that everything should be happening right now and that's not how the real world works, you guys. Sometimes you take one for the team. You know what I mean? So if you get a really good opportunity that fits your brand, your aesthetic, your voice type, it may not be at Madison Square Garden. You might be at a bookstore. It might be, at a church. It might be at different venues. It might be only for 20 people. None of those things should matter. Your job is to get out there and share, because what we need to do is let the populace know, society know, at this point in history, that not only that we can do it, but that we are dynamite. That when we come prepared, and we're gonna let you have it. You know, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So you cannot do that if you didn't practice. You cannot do that if you're going to show up late. You cannot do that when you feel that you should be paid all this money, but you don't have a brand and a history so that you can get that. Sometimes you got to do things for free. You know, Lord knows I have. Okay. So that's just where we are in history. And these things are slowly changing. And I feel very confident in the next 10 years that we're going to be having a whole different conversation. Look how far we've come in the last 5 to 7 years. I mean, it's really stupendous and really amazing. So that's my biggest thing I would say. Be prepared. Sometimes volunteer, I will say, like for organizations like this, see if you can volunteer to go and be a part of a cause. You know what I'm saying? And share your art through that. You know, you got to make a living, you got to pay your bills, you know, figure out what you have to do in that. But one of the things people don't realize is Monica Roberts, who was my mentor, she and I would talk about whether it was okay for me to perform for various organizations, whether they were non-for-profit, politicians. You know, sometimes we should get a red flag and be like, no, you're gonna pass. All money is not good money, okay? And you will be used. Sometimes you don't know it, but you got to be very, very careful because people see where we're going. They can see our amazingness and how we attract so many people and we're marketable and you're beautiful or handsome or whatever it is, you know, that surface stuff that people stay on. So you want to be the person that's prepared. You want to be the person that is always early, not just on time. You want to be the person that lets them have it from your talent. Okay. And if you do those things, you will be successful.
Thank you, Tona. Thank you very much. Those are very powerful sentiments, advice that you shared with all of us, and just really appreciate, you know, the time with you today and the conversation that we've had. I have so many other questions, but I know we're out of time. You know, this has been really great. Just one last thing, how can folks learn more about you, where they can follow you?
Yes, so I am on all of the major platforms with social media. If you follow the Tona Brown page with the blue check, if you follow that, that's kind of like my community page. You'll see all of the different things that I do. Also on Instagram at Tenacity is how I say it, but it's spelled Tona City, TONACITY. And that same handle is on Twitter. TONACITY on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And come and join me for my Conversations with Tona Brown series. I'm doing it on Twitch, but I also live stream it on YouTube as well as on my Facebook page with the blue check. So because there's too many people for me to add anyone to that page, just follow it, push the little follow button. Because there's so many people on that particular page. But I really enjoyed myself. Thank you guys for having me. I mean, this was wonderful. And I can't wait to see more conversations like this. Conversations make a difference. And to me, conversations save lives. And that is why I started Conversations with Tona Brown.
Very well said, Tona. And I think we're going to end with that. And thank all of the folks who have joined us, and we're very patient since we went a little over time. Truly appreciate you all. Tona, thank you so much. This has been really amazing, and I hope that we get to have more conversations like this and share it with everyone else. So
absolutely, anytime. Just give me a call.
Awesome. And then I'm gonna, I think, turn it over to Mario or Talia.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you closed it out perfectly, Bianca. Thank you all so much for joining us. Bianca, thank you so much for moderating. Tona, as always, thank you so much for joining us. This has been such an amazing conversation. And we look forward to working with everybody again soon. Thank you all so much. We have our last social of ties is happening. It'll be a little a little dance party. We get some costumes on, get dressed up or get a costume on, and then join us at 6:30 for the final social of ties. But thank you all so much for today. We really appreciate it.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Maria. Bye, folks. Have a good night.
It was wonderful.